Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I Can See You Now. The ad was small and straightforward, buried in the local free classifieds between someone selling pit bull puppies and someone else wanted to buy a used chainsaw. It said, "Disabled person looking for help decorating for Halloween. Can pay $50 per hour for expected 3 hours of work. $75 for any overtime." Sitting in my car, I gnawed on a beef jerky as I considered the ad skeptically. I really didn't want to deal with some weird old stranger wanting skeletons hung in just the right spot for hours, and God only knew where the decorations were stored or what shape they were in. I also didn't like the idea of rooting around in some attic or basement for junk. I glanced at the dash of my car. The fucking brake service light was still on. I needed money for new brakes and tires bad, and that extra money might be enough to get them started while I waited for next week's paycheck. Plus, who knew? Maybe if they liked me, they'd give me an extra tip or something. Sighing, I took out my phone and punched in the number below the classified ad. "Oh, hello." I felt myself frowning into the phone. Yeah, well, I saw your ad for getting help with Halloween decorations, and if you still needed someone I was going to see about, come and do it." A pause, and then, "No, I still need help. Do you think you could come today?" "I don't think today, but probably tomorrow about 6 in the evening, if that would be okay." Yes, that sounds fine. Not too late? I was going to come and do it after I get off work." "No, 6 will be fine. Just you, though. I don't mean to be rude, but I'm a bit skittish around strangers, and I don't want more than one in my house at a time." "Okay, that's weird. Some kind of shut-in maybe. Sure, that's fine. It'll just be me. Same money as on the ad? $150 for first 3 hours and $75 every hour after that." "Yes, that's right. And if it goes well, I may be able to give a little extra at the end." "Fuck yeah. Sounds like a plan. See you then." I hesitated, not sure whether to say ma'am or sir. The voice on the line was a bit high-pitched, but in a warbling, watery way that made it hard to tell if it was a man or woman speaking. "And thank you for the opportunity." "No, thank you. See you tomorrow." Hanging up the call, I stared at my phone for a minute. People are so fucking weird. Still, it was good money. Maybe a nice thing to do too, and they didn't sound like an axe murderer. Probably just some lonely person who needed some help. Pulling out of the gas station parking lot, my brakes squealed as I eased to a stop at the traffic light. "Yeah, I hear you, fucker. I'm working on it." The place was a 2-story white farmhouse on the edge of town. At one time, it might have actually been part of a farm, though it didn't really look old enough for that. This area had been divided up into lots for houses since before I was born, and while the fence line of the property ran out a good ways in every direction, I could still see the silhouette of another house to the northern border of trees. Approaching the front door, I saw a note taped next to the buzzer. It said, "Door is open, come on in. I'm in the living room." Frowning at the note, my head filled with the image of an old woman naked and spread-eagled on a plastic-wrapped sofa, waiting for me to come in and be seduced by her musty charms. I gagged a little and stuffed the note into my pocket. I was being an idiot, and I was already running late. Pushing against the front door, it opened easily and I went in. The house was a little odd inside, not run down or dirty really. If anything, it was very clean with no dust anywhere, but it also lacked much decoration or color. Pale, off-white walls punctuated with occasional tan door frames. To the left, I caught a glimpse of some furniture and decided that might be the living room. Yeah, there's someone sitting in that, what the fuck? The room was so dimly lit that I had almost missed it at first, but there was someone sitting in the chair on the far side of the room. I figured it was the person that hired me, but it was hard to tell anything. because they were completely covered with a green sheet, like some bargain basement ghost. Hello? The sheet ghost shifted slightly. Yes, I'm here. I was trying not to act freaked out, but I was freaked the fuck out. Are you okay? The ghost shook a little with laughter. Oh, yes. I'll explain. I would have told you on the phone, but I didn't want to scare you away. It's nothing to worry about. Okay. What's nothing to worry about? My condition. I have a genetic condition that makes my eyes extremely sensitive to light. I can handle small lights in darkness and moonlight well enough, but daytime or lighting up an entire room is very painful for me. Swallowing, I gave a short nod. Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry about that, and I'm sorry for running a bit late. The ghost lifted an arm and waved it. Oh no, I'm just glad you came. You'll find the decorations in the room on the far side of the hall, all in boxes. The boxes are all labeled where the decorations go generally. Looking back, I saw the edge of a stack of boxes in the room opposite the one I was in. Oh, okay. Do you want to tell me where specific things go, or just... No, I can't really see under this thing, and it'll be a while yet before it's dark enough for me to take it off. I trust your judgment. Just put them in areas that correspond with the labels on the boxes. That's all I ask. I nodded before I remembered they'd already said they couldn't see me. Sure. I'll try to do a good job. I'm sure you will. And don't worry. I'll be able to see you once the night comes on. I paused at that last. They probably didn't mean for that to sound super creepy, but that was super fucking creepy. I shook my head as I headed back across the hall. It didn't matter. It was good money, and it didn't sound hard. Fuck, it was a lot of boxes. 16 of them, in fact. 5 of them were for rooms on the first floor of the house. All of them empty, except for the living room where my employer sat quietly, and the kitchen that had a table with no chairs and a refrigerator. I thought about asking her where exactly she wanted me to put the stuff that went in second door on the right, first floor, but decided against it. She'd already said to use my judgment, hadn't she? Still, despite not having a ton of experience decorating for holidays, I found it strangely difficult to place things in the empty rooms, without the landmarks of furniture and hangings. Everything felt bleakly alien, with every skull or jack-o'-lantern or ghost that I put out feeling less placed and abandoned, even though I couldn't say exactly why. The whole process of decorating inside creeped me out, and I was relieved when I reached the end of those boxes and moved on to the ones that all seemed to be meant for outside. Front porch, side porch, exterior garage, things like that. And even better, a few boxes that just generally said, yard. An hour outside, and I realized I was actually enjoying myself. The weirdness of the house seemed a bit distant, and putting out the decorations other places was actually fun. Most of it was high-quality stuff, and despite my fears, it was generally in good condition. I hung skeletons on the porch, and decorated the yard with tombstones and skulking black cats. Around one of the 2 big trees in the front yard, I set up a small coven of witches around what I guess was supposed to be a witch pot or cauldron or whatever. It looked cool, but as it got darker, I could already tell it was going to be hard to see from a distance at night. I'd seen a spotlight in one of the boxes, but no extension cords. Going into garage, I rooted around on a few crowded shelves and surprised myself by finding a long cord. The outlets on the front of the house were closed, and the cord was big enough to make it to the tree and the spotlight with room to spare. Careful to set up the light pointing away from the house. I had it angled where you could see the silhouette of the witches as you approached the house. I grinned at my work. It looked pretty cool if I said so myself, which I did. Going back to the boxes, I had a few miscellaneous things left, but nothing that looked worth putting out. This rubber bat was kind of funny, but it didn't really match anything else, and this cutout jack-o'-lantern looked too old and yellow too. I paused as my fingers brushed the plastic card. I picked it up and squinted at it closer, trying to make sense of why a driver's license was in a box of decorations. The license was of a pretty, smiling girl named Jasmine Parks. She looked around my age. No, she was 2 years older at 26. But who was she, and why was her license in the box? I glanced back up at the house. What if my employer was Jasmine? They definitely could be female based on both in their size and voice. though I couldn't say anything for sure. While still weird, it would make more sense that the license had accidentally gotten into the box from someone who lived at the house, and I kind of got the impression they lived alone. So was the odd ghost inside Jasmine Parks? I felt a small nervous flutter of sadness and excitement. It was so terrible that she was as sensitive to light as she said. She seemed nice, and she really was pretty in the picture. I shook my head. I had to not be stupid just because I saw a good-looking girl, daydreaming about some hypothetical stranger that might not even be the person inside. Standing up, I put the license in my back pocket. No, I needed to do a final check of everything. Give her the license, get paid, and go home, giving the coven a final approving nod. I picked up the 2 boxes I'd been looking in and headed back to the house to check everything else one last time. When I went back into the house, everything was totally dark. Hello? I think I'm finished. I crab walked inside with my arms full of mostly empty boxes, brushing against the wall until I could turn into the room where the boxes were all kept. Fuck, it really was dark inside. Even once my eyes adjusted, I could barely make out the shadowy shapes of the other boxes as I put my load down. I set up a spotlight for those witches, but, I pointed it away from the house. If you want off, though, I can unplug it. That's wonderful. You've done a wonderful job. I jumped and let out a small gasp at the sound of her voice close by. I'd kind of assumed she was still over in the living room, but that had sounded much nearer than that, maybe in the same room, though it was hard to get my bearings. Heart pounding. I nodded before shaking my head and saying, "Thanks. I think I'm right at 3 hours, so no need to pay me overtime. But if I can get the $150, I'll be heading on out." A soft laugh, and then, "The money's in my purse, on the sofa, over in the living room, if you don't mind getting it." I almost argued, saying I didn't want to be responsible for going into a stranger's purse, but she had offered, and maybe it was easier for her if someone else did stuff like that. I started easing my way across to the hallway, hands waving out in front of me like a blind man. Yeah, her having to turn on a light to look in her purse would be bad for her, and it's not like she can see in the dark well enough to... "I can see you now." I froze, blinking. "Oh." The voice was definitely coming from behind me in the box room. "Oh, yes, I can see you very well. You're very handsome." I felt another nervous flutter, but this one was shot through a growing unease as I looked around in the murky dark and didn't see anyone. Thanks? "I can't see you." Looking back behind me, I saw a dark shape stand up from behind the stacks of boxes. How about now? Something about that shape, on top of everything else, made my heart start to pound as my throat began to tighten. I started walking fast toward the living room, pulling out my phone and turning on its light as I searched for the purse on the sofa. Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna grab the money and then I have to jet." I felt awkward going into someone's purse, but my fear and desperation to be out of there outweighed any remaining pangs of politeness. There was a red purse against the back of the sofa, and I dug my hand into the main compartment as I tried to open it wider with a hand holding the phone. I felt the thick paper bills just as I heard a creak in the floorboards out in the hall. Shining the light on the money I'd pulled out, I counted out the $150 and stuffed the rest back in the purse as I turned to run back to hall and outside. I froze as I saw what looked like the shadowy silhouette of a head peeking around the edge of the doorframe at me. It looked misshapen and strange, but I couldn't see enough detail in the dark to say it wasn't just my imagination. I was still debating whether to just run past or not when she spoke again. "Are you sure you have to leave yet? I wanted to see you more." I let out a shiver. "Yeah, sorry I have to be going. I took just the $150. Thanks for the job," and the figure stepped out into the doorway, and I felt my voice die in my throat. Something was wrong. It wasn't my imagination. Her body didn't look right. I'd been fighting the urge to shine the light on her since I brought out, but I had to get out of there, and now she was walking closer. As I stood there frozen, and I had to do something and get away because this wasn't right and oh fuck. I turned the flashlight on her, and we both began to scream. She was made of eyes. Her body was naked, twisted and bulbous from head to toe with clusters of hideous eyes. Small ones, big ones, those that were milkily blind, and those that focused on me with fury, even if it meant staring into the too bright light. There were so many, all moving independently and carpeting her flesh so thoroughly with tumorous sight that you could barely see the patches of pale, gray meat in between. Something in me broke at the sight of her, and I started to run, still letting out a whistling wail even as I dodged her grasp and headed for the front door. For her part, her scream had boiled off into a simmering hiss that grew as she chased after me. I fucking told you how I hate the light. I didn't slow down except to throw open the door. I'm sorry. I have to go. It made no sense to apologize or explain anything at this point, but my mouth was on autopilot as the rest of my body tried to keep me alive. I leapt down the porch steps and started running across the yard to my car, and I had the fleeting hopeful thought that maybe she wouldn't leave the house. Then I heard that hiss growing louder like a train bearing down. Was she actually fucking gaining on me? I think she hit me as I drew close to the witch's coven I'd set up at the tree. It wasn't even a question of keeping my feet. She's got me from the side, and I rolled into the light I'd set up there, its illumination winking out immediately. I had a desperate idea of getting it going again and shining it on her, but there was no time. She was already on me, wet, bulbous fingers digging into my belt and tugging me backward in the direction of the house. There was no words anymore, just my screaming and her tired, sullen hiss. I tried to grip the grass, the ground, anything, but there was nothing. I had to get free of her and find a weapon or something, and fast. She'd already pulled me a third of the way back toward the house. Just then I saw the extension cord I'd used to hook up the lamp near the witches, lunging to my right. I grabbed it tightly and then curled up in a ball briefly. Then, before she could react, I rolled onto my back and kicked her hard in the chest. I felt something pop beneath my left foot, and she let out a fresh scream as she gave up trying to grab me again, at least for the moment. Looking up, I saw she was doubled over, holding her right shoulder, dark fluid running between the long, thin branches that were her fingers. Part of me wanted to try just running again. Maybe she was hurt or distracted enough that I could make it to my car this time. But then she looked up at me, not just with the 100 eyes covering her body, but the two dark pits nestled deep in the middle of what passed for her head. There was still anger there, but worse, there was hunger. Fuck this. Rolling to my knees and standing, I yanked hard at the extension cord in both directions, pulling it free from the exterior outlet and sending the lamp skittering off against the base of the tree. Sucking in a breath, I forced myself to move to her back and quickly wrapped the cord around her neck twice, pulling it tight as I began to drag her toward the tree. It was all so strange. I could see myself doing it, and I did have some basic, instinctual plan, but I don't remember any specific thoughts or feelings about it. I just had to get it done. Get it done so I could get away and live. So I pulled her along, ignoring her thrashing as I threw the longer part of the cord to one of the big lower branches and started to pull her up. She was clawing at her neck, trying to get free or pull herself up further, but she was too tired, and I made sure to not pull her up high enough to reach the overhead branch. Instead, she just fought and kicked and stared at me with all those terrible, terrible eyes. I kept hold of the cord the whole time, grunting and sweating with the effort and being ready to bolt if the tree or cord decided to give. Instead, they held, and she finally stopped moving. Only then did I have a moment of guilt. Had she just been some kind of poor mutant? Maybe even the girl whose license I'd found in the box? But no, I didn't know it then, but I checked into it later. She'd been putting out that same ad for 6 weeks for the last 5 years. During those same periods of time, 8 people had gone missing in the area, including last year, when a student named Jasmine Parks had vanished without a trace. Even without that knowledge, my guilty feelings were short-lived. The flood of adrenaline was leaving me now, and as I backed away from the hanging tree, I distantly felt myself start to shake and cry. Whatever the fuck her deal was, she had tried to kill me, or keep me, or whatever. Fuck her. Getting into my car, I stared out at her hanging silhouette against the rising orange moon. Best decoration I put out all night, giving a shuddering laugh. I cranked up my car, the brake light flaring orange in the gloom. I grimaced at it, my eyes drifting away to the dash clock before wandering back to my last addition to the yard. I'd been at it well over 3 hours at this point, leaving the car running. I trudged back across the yard and into the house. The purse was where I left it, and it was my lucky day. She had exactly $75 left. Pocketing the money, I walked back the way I had come, giving the tree and its passenger wide berth while paying attention for any signs of movement. It was only when I was near my car again that I turned back and flipped her a bird. Happy fucking Halloween. The body did twitch in the October moonlight then, and I leapt into the car and stomped on the gas. If it moved again, I wasn't there to see it. The next few days I kept an eye on the papers and websites for news of a monster being found, or some kind of murder or something. There was nothing. 6 months later, the house and the tree were bulldozed. I think maybe some things are hidden. They are meant to be seen, and the world helps keep it that way, keep you from seeing them. But that doesn't mean they aren't there, or that sometimes when the time is right, they can see you, can find you in the dark. Story 2. My wife is convinced that I've been replaced. Please help me. I don't know what to do. Yes, it probably sounds insane. I should start with a backstory. But God, how hard it is to remember the simple, happy times before everything that happened. I met my wife, Catherine, when she was 24 and I was 28. We lived in a small town in Kentucky. You have trouble finding it even with a map, and the population was tiny. Everyone knew each other. I'd worked as an electrician all my life. First at a factory, then I started my own small business. Repairs, wiring, private jobs. My love life had never really worked out until I met her. She worked as an elementary school teacher. Smiled at every child, was kind and polite to everyone. My Catherine was the only ray of light in the darkness around me. I loved her for her simplicity. She could find joy in the most ordinary things. Morning coffee, the smell of wet grass, a cheap movie on the couch. We didn't have much money, but we had peace, a home, a dog, and that feeling that everything was right, that everything would be fine. I spent evenings fixing things while she wrote lesson plans or knitted. Sometimes we'd sit in silence, listen to crickets, or stay up all night talking about everything and nothing, thinking about children and what we'd name them. Back then, it felt like life had finally found its meaning. The problems began maybe 2 months ago. At first, small things. She started having trouble sleeping, then began looking at me strangely, as if something in my face disturbed her. I asked if everything was okay, and she laughed. Sorry, just tired. The kids at school are driving me crazy. Gradually, though I can't even say exactly when it got worse. She slept less, not because she had insomnia, but because she was afraid to fall asleep. I asked her what was wrong, but she said she was fine. Still, when we lay together, she'd suddenly get up and go into another room, returning only at dawn. She started having nightmares, but never told me what they were. One day I lost my temper. You have to understand, I was just worried about my wife. From a lack of sleep, she started to look worse. Dark circles under her eyes, red eyes, pale skin. She lost weight, and every time I tried to help, she pushed me away. So I sat her down across from me and directly asked what she was dreaming about. She was silent for a long time, trembling and glancing at me furtively, as if she was afraid. And then, when tears began to roll down her cheeks, she whispered, "There's a man in my dreams. God, I'm scared, Tom." I went to hug her, and when I reached for her, she flinched as if I'd frightened her. After that, things seemed to get better, or so I thought. How wrong I was. She used to ask how my day went, but now she just stared out the window. With each passing day, she spoke to me less and less, her words short and dry, and then she'd go to the bathroom or kitchen for some errands, closing the door behind her. And it wasn't just the silence her eyes had changed. If before they were green, emerald-like, full of life and love, now her gaze made my spine go cold. There wasn't anger or hatred there. No, it was something closer to mistrust. Wariness, as if she was seeing me for the first time. Over the next week I began to feel anxious, a strange burning under my skin. as if something was wrong, but I couldn't tell where the crack was until I realized she was studying me. When I drank coffee, I could feel her eyes on me. I'd look up and she'd immediately turn away, pretending to slice fruit, but her fingers trembled and the knife froze halfway to the board. I'd step outside for a smoke, and when I turned around, I'd see her peeking through the curtain, then she'd instantly close it. When I showered, I'd catch her watching me, studying my body, then she'd run away. She started doing it even while I slept. She almost stopped talking to me, instead writing something in a notebook and hiding it as soon as I entered the room. Photos began to disappear from their frames. She'd talk on the phone with someone, but hang up the moment I came in. I made an appointment with a psychologist for us, but she refused, said she was afraid to be near me. It all happened so suddenly. It seemed just yesterday we were stargazing in each other's arms, and now this. The strangeness grew every day. Sometimes she asked me to sleep on the couch. I agreed, hoping it would calm her, but it was useless. Her paranoia only worsened. It got to the point where when I tried to hug her, she screamed, "Don't come near me," and flinched as if I'd hit her. After one of those nights, I decided I had to find out what was really going on, even if it meant taking her to a doctor afterward. I pretended to be asleep when she stood in the hallway. Then she slowly approached soft, careful steps. She stopped at the foot of the bed, and for several seconds there was a dead silence, broken only by her uneven breathing. I could feel her watching, not just watching, comparing. That's when I became truly terrified, a cold dread twisting inside me as my wife became something I couldn't recognize. Then the bed shifted. Slightly, she sat down on the edge. The air grew heavy. I could feel her stare physically, like pressure on my skin. Then her cold fingers gently touched my wrist, held it for a few seconds, then quickly let go as it burned and whispered, pulsed faster than Tom's. My heart clenched so hard I nearly twitched. She leaned closer. I could hear her breathing against my face, short, shaky. She smelled of lavender and something sour that made goosebumps crawl down my back. Her lips barely moved. I remember clearly, Tom had a small scar right here. She touched my cheek. "But you don't." I clenched my teeth to keep from gasping. Those few seconds of silence lasted an eternity. What scar? I never had a scar on my cheek. I'd know if I did. I wanted to sink into the ground and scream all at once. But I kept lying still until I heard a choked sob and her fading footsteps. The door slammed. I opened my eyes, my heart pounding furiously. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, too afraid to close my eyes. In the morning, I went to work early, dreading the hours until my shift ended. That evening, over dinner, I said, "Kate, we need to talk. What's going on?" She gripped her fork so tightly her knuckles turned white, then looked me dead in the eye. "Tom, you've been acting strange." "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Sometimes you look different. Sometimes your voice sounds wrong. You even smell different." I didn't know what to say. My head was chaos, and somehow I just laughed. "Kate, maybe you're just imagining things." "I don't know, Tom." My eyes fell on the knife rack. There was a clean strip of dust where the largest kitchen knife should have been the one we used for everything, bread, meat, anything. I distinctly remembered it being there before that night. My heart slammed into my throat with a primal panic. I looked at Kate, and she was staring right at me. I wanted to speak, but couldn't. It hit me. Then my wife might be planning to kill me. The next morning she left for work, and I, like a caged animal, started searching the house. I hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. I know I should have just left, or taken her to a hospital, but she's my wife. I love her. She has to see that I am me. I tore through the apartment, frantic, desperate to find something, anything that would help me understand what was happening to her. And I did. After about an hour, in the back of the closet behind a pile of sweaters, I found her wooden box, old, slightly cracked. The lid was ajar, and when I opened it, a thick notebook fell into my hands. It smelled of coffee and sweat. Her initials on the cover, written in her neat cursive. My heart froze as I realized it was the diary she'd been hiding from me. The paper bent under my fingers. Her handwriting familiar, but this time jagged, shaky, the page stained with what looked like tears. He's sleeping. I stand by the bed and watch. He looks like Tom, but he's not. Tom had a scar on his left hand from that accident by the river. This one's skin is smooth. He smiles, but the smile doesn't reach his eyes. Something replaced him. I keep counting days, marking steps. If the real Tom, my husband, is alive, where is he? A wave of nausea rose in my throat. With each page, her handwriting grew more erratic. I tested his speech. He says, "I love you," in the same tone, but without warmth, not like before. Tom smelled of vanilla, but this one smells of dust and cheap cologne. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My knees trembled. The air around me tightened like a noose. I flipped to the last page. I can't let this thing stay in our house. It wears a smile, his name. I tried talking to it, begging, but it just smiled and said all the right words. It didn't defend itself. Maybe because it isn't afraid? Its right hand twitches when it lies. I could have killed IT today, but for some reason I couldn't. I know I have to. For Tom. I won't let some monster wear his skin. My hands were slick with sweat. My whole body was sweating, even though the room was cold. I placed the diary on the bed and sat down, trying to process everything I had just read. An accident? God! She was exaggerating. All that came out of it was a concussion and some bruised ribs. I stayed in the hospital for about a week. Yeah, 7 days. Then my phone rang, making me jump. It was Sheriff Martin, a kind old man I'd known for years. "Tom, everything all right over there?" Catherine called. Said someone's living in your house pretending to be her husband. I froze. "What did you say?" Says you're not you. I've known her for a year. Always seemed stable. Domestic quarrel, huh? No, just stress. She's tired. Evening came slowly. I sat on the couch, elbows on my knees, looking at an old photograph, the one that used to sit on our mantel before all this. Catherine and I by the lake, smiling, her arms around me. The sun so bright, that day we had to squint. I stared at us, at the little details. Her blonde hair catching the light, her hand around mine, the green shimmer in our eyes. It felt like a lifetime ago. When the door creaked open, I nearly jumped. My wife's, if I can still call her, that steps were slow and tired. Her bag thudding softly to floor. She looked exhausted, her eyes red, her hair a mess. I stood, holding the diary. "Kate, we need to talk." She looked at me warily, like a trapped animal sensing a snare. "What's that in your hand?" Her voice was even, but something trembled in it. I found this. I need to understand what's happening," I said, showing her the diary. Catherine froze. For a moment. I thought she'd break down crying, but instead, she slowly stepped closer, looking straight into my face, her cold breath brushing against my skin. "So, what did you figure out, Tom? That I'm crazy? You think I've lost my mind, don't you?" "No. You wrote that I've been replaced. That I don't have a scar." She turned away, her lips pressed tight. Tom had one. We even joked it made him look tougher. "Listen, sweetheart." I took a step closer, a strange knot tightening in my gut. I'm the same man. I remember everything. How we met, the candles at our wedding, how you laughed when we watched comedies, what you said about that stupid show when we finished it. I remember everything, Catherine. It's me. She stared at me, unblinking, her shoulders trembling as if she were freezing. I looked into her eyes, and there was something there, pain and horror mixed together, as if I stood before her as someone both familiar and wrong. "You say it like you rehearsed it," she whispered. "Because it's true." I stepped closer, my voice cracking into a shout. "What do I have to do for you to believe me?" "What?" Catherine said nothing, just breathed heavily, like she was fighting herself, staring into my eyes. Then she suddenly backed away, step by step, toward her bag. I didn't realize what was happening at first. She bent down, as if for a handkerchief, and in the next moment, I saw the glint of metal, a knife, the missing one. "Kate." I breathed, disbelieving. "Catherine, put it down." Stop pretending, you monster." I managed half a step toward her. She raised her hand. At first, I thought she was only threatening me. Panic tightened my fists. I wanted to yell, to grab her shoulders, to make her listen, but then a strike. Burning pain slashed through my chest. Everything went white. The last thing I saw was her face so familiar, twisted by terror and despair at once. She stood over me, her hand trembling, her lips whispering something like, "Tom, where are you, my love?" And then everything went dark. I woke up in a hospital. At first, nothing but fog. Then the smell of antiseptic. The faint beep of a monitor, unfamiliar voices. I tried to move, my head pain shot through my body. The doctor explained I'd lost a lot of blood, but somehow survived. The knife missed my heart by an inch. Catherine had run away. I listened, not believing any of it was real. A couple of days later, Martin came by. I told him everything about the knife, the diary, her thinking I wasn't me. He listened, frowning, taking notes. When he finished and was about to leave, he turned back. Didn't expect this from Catherine. "Don't worry, we'll find her. When you're discharged, come by my place. I got some Cuban cigars from a friend. We'll relax a bit." Without thinking, I said, "I don't smoke." He frowned, about to say something, but then just nodded and left, closing the door behind him. For several minutes I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to come to terms with everything that had happened. Then I noticed a small mirror in the corner of the room. I looked at my reflection and froze. My face was pale, my lips dry, but that wasn't what caught my attention. Interesting, can eyes change color from green to blue? Story 3. Complex. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I lingered on the slow, mechanical rumble of the car as my lungs filled with warm smoke. I exhaled slowly, watching the thin threads exit my car window, the wind interrupting its calm, unpredictable pattern. I let the voicemail play again. "See, I know the last thing you probably want is to hear from me right now, but if there was anyone I would try to talk to, it'd be you. I'm back in town. I know you said not to. It's just, I'm sorry. I couldn't stay away after all. I'm going to the bridge tonight. You know the one. Please don't come find me." I put my phone down. One more deep breath. 2, 3. Gaze fixed toward the ceiling of my car. I went over the words again and again, line by line, word by word. I was searching for hidden meanings, unnatural shifts in tone. I wanted there to be more, a glimpse of hesitation, a plea for help, some sort of ambiguity as to her intentions. But no, Elle wasn't the kind of person to make half-baked claims. She had decided a long time ago this is how it would end. I just didn't think it would be so soon. Our last interaction was still vivid in my mind. Late September of the previous year. A sudden invitation at the local diner, one that I hesitantly accepted. We sat in silence, as nearly half a decade of no contact was broken. After a while, I opened my mouth, but no words followed. How could they really? Elle was one of those people in life that had long overstayed their welcome. There was nothing that could be said that wasn't already. Our story had already arrived at its natural conclusion. Elle guiltily avoided eye contact with me. Her arms crossed offensively at the table. She wore a red hoodie, her autumn hair bundled and haphazardly tucked into the back of her collar. Despite her efforts, it wasn't hard to make out the slight bruising that crept up the right side of her neck, nor the poorly masked stench of alcohol. "I'm leaving town." Elle cut through the silence suddenly, monotone, as if those 3 words were being rehearsed over and over in her head. It wasn't like it was surprising. There wasn't much reason for anyone to stay in this town, even less for Elle. Everyone wants an escape at some point in their lives. At least she was one of the lucky few with a reason. Is that it? Her posture tightened. "I just thought you should know." "Why?" Who else would I tell? She was right. It didn't make it any better, though. "Listen, Elle, I can't be that person for you." I clutched my arm. It had been several years, but I still felt the pain. Not so much physical anymore. as it bloomed into the worst kind of scar, the kind that eats away at your psyche and continues to harm long after its infliction. Stop, C. I know. Then why am I here? She paused, long enough for me to consider leaving, but right when I was about to get up, last week I tried to kill myself. She spoke so matter-of-factly it failed to register. My uncle found me. He dragged me into his room and beat me. After that he cried, told me I was trying to leave him like everyone else did. Her uncle, Scott, I was reminded of her mom's funeral. She was a piece of shit in her own right, but her final gift takes the cake, leaving the care of a deadbeat dirtbag like him up to L. He did nothing but sleaze around, get high, share needles with 20-something-year-olds, and play victim. I need you to know, because if I end up coming back... She didn't need to finish her thought. For the first time during our conversation, Elle met my gaze. I communicated something back to her with my eyes that I thought I had lost a long time ago. Sympathy, understanding, then don't come back. I flicked a lit cigarette out of the car into the darkness outside, and the memory with it. It was time to go. The headlights cut through thick fog as I drove towards a bridge. I traveled on a tiny rural two-way street that zigzagged through hills and tall pines. The anticipation weighed on me. I detailed each step I would take in my head. Pull over, put the car in park, past the traffic bollards, onto the trail. Then I was there. A wooden bridge connected the two sides of a ravine over a small creek. The fog made it difficult to see the other side, even though it was less than 100 feet across. I made my way forward slowly, not knowing what my next pace would reveal. Part of me hoped she would appear. The other lamented the implications if she didn't. Through the haze, I could make out the figure of a woman near the midpoint of the bridge. Elle, she took a step towards me. No, not a step. Something was wrong. A stumble, unbalanced, her weight shifting too sharply on one side, barely able to move in a straight line. As she drew closer, I saw why. The woman's ankle dragged behind her, bent unnaturally with ruptured skin. One arm dangled precariously, held together by bits of fleshy sinew and torn muscle. Her neck crooked, as long, wet strands of familiar autumn-hued hair covered bits of her ruined and broken body. Jesus, Elle. As Elle's hair swayed side to side, it revealed a dislocated, bloody jaw. I heard her voice, muffled unnatural, as it were overlaid with static. Where were you? Elle, her approach quickened. I backed up, but impossibly found myself running into the railing of the bridge. Where were you? She repeated the line over and over. Wait. I held my hands out and closed my eyes, expecting violence. The scar on my arm burned with reminiscence, but it never came. I looked around and was met with the uncaring white blur that encompassed the bridge. Nothing. Turning around, I peeked over the railing. Despite the thick fog, I could see the small creek below with mystical clarity. And there she was. Don't come find me, I heard from behind, whipping around to see that I had somehow ended up at the far end of the ravine. No one. Only fog. Only the bridge. It took a few loops for me to understand something was off. A few dozen more to realize I was trapped. I tried to leave. I did. But I've walked the length of this bridge nearly 1,000 times. Sometimes, I see her disfigured body silhouetted against the mist, only for it to disappear as I approach. Other times, I see Scott beat and berate her as she cowers on the floor. I remember that day. Elle held me back as I tore the nearby landline out of the wall and bludgeoned him within an inch of his life. Elle swung at me with a kitchen knife when I refused to stop. The day I got my scar. He's all I have left. Her distorted, scratchy voice played again and again in my head. But every time I crossed that bridge, without fail, one thing stayed constant. Elle's body remained at the bottom of that creek. I thought maybe I could stop it. That one of these times, through fog, I would see her teetering on the edge, hesitant, afraid, waiting for me to come. I walked what felt like days, maybe even weeks trying to find Elle, the real Elle. But you won't, her voice taunted, because she's at the bottom of that ravine. A truth not worth confronting. What did I say to her again? I can't be that person for you. I muttered. Then why are you here? I don't know. No, you do. The fog cleared, and I peered over the edge into the creek below. I had seen Elle's mangled, broken body 1,000 times walking along that bridge, and thought that maybe I would see it 1,000 more. But all I saw was running water. Her final moments washed away, this town forever rid of her memory and burden. But I wasn't just like she wanted. 1 week. It took me 1 week to listen to the voicemail she left. Deep down, I knew it would be the last time I would hear from her. I backed away from the railing. I see. It was your corpse speaking to me that day. It didn't matter when I heard those words. You had always meant for them to be your last. The fact you chose me to hear them told me everything I needed to know. The trail in sight at last. I made my way back to the car. I felt nothing as the tip-tap of boots on would transition to the crunching of gravel, which again changed to the clacking of asphalt. Back to safety, I lit a single cigarette, letting the smoke fill my lungs. I stared at the sea of pines I had just emerged from. I pressed play. Again, her voice surrounded me, same as the encroaching fog. Story 4, The Impossible. In 2012, I was working as a lead diagnostics technician at an automotive shop in California. It was a typical day, and my shift started at 7 a.m. sharp. I parked across the street and walked into the shop to greet my boss when my phone rang. The call brought devastating news. My grandfather had just passed away in the hospital. Overwhelmed, I quickly said hi and bye to my boss and headed straight home. Days earlier, strange events began unfolding. It was a Saturday and my dad and I were working at our house. Throughout the day, peculiar things happened. One incident involved a garage light that repeatedly turned itself on even after we made certain it was switched off. We would leave the garage only to return and find the light inexplicably lit again. Later that same day, my dad received mysterious text messages from an unknown number with a 209 area code. The message urgently read, "Mi Chief Estimu Malo. You need to come now." Alarmed, we quickly packed up and headed to pick up my sister, and then all drove together to Manteca in my parent Honda Civic. During the drive, my dad received additional messages, including one that asked, "Are you getting my messages?" My dad replied, "Yes." Upon our arrival, we discovered that none of my uncles had sent those texts, and none had recently changed their phone numbers. Days later at the hospital, my sister went through my dad's phone to find a conversation had inexplicably vanished. My dad never deleted messages. After my grandfather's passing, my family gathered at my grandmother's house, where the atmosphere was heavy with grief. Hours later, my dad suggested we head back home to prepare a room for my grandma to stay with us. Agreeing, my sister, my girlfriend at the time, and I got into my sister's 2012 Honda Civic. My sister drove, I sat in the front passenger seat, and my girlfriend sat behind my sister. My parents followed closely behind in their own Civic. As we drove down a quiet street, I noticed a rosary hanging from my sister's rear view mirror, knotted tightly. I casually asked her, "Why do you tie the rosary in such a tight knot?" She responded, "I don't like it dangling too low when I drive." Not thinking much of it, I returned to scrolling through my phone. We approached a red light, preparing to turn left onto the freeway. Suddenly, my sister screamed. I barely had time to look up from my phone before blinding headlights filled my vision. An oncoming Volkswagen, traveling at nearly 60 miles per hour, swerved into our lane, barreling head-on toward our stationary car. The impact was immediate and fierce. My parents, who witnessed everything from behind, later recounted how the collision was so intense it lifted our car's rear wheels off the ground and threw us completely out of our lane. Inside the car, everything turned smoky and my ears rang painfully. A giant check engine light blinked furiously on the dashboard. In the stunned silence following the crash, I opened my eyes and saw 3 rosary beads resting in my lap. My heart sank. I thought to myself, "Oh no, Stephanie's rosary broke. My memory at this point becomes hazy, but I distinctly recall a woman dressed entirely in white scrubs, like a nurse, opening my passenger door and calmly instructing us to move quickly to safety across the street. According to my parents, however, there was no woman in white. We simply walked across the street on our own. Shaken and injured, my family frantically checked each other for injuries. I had a fractured sternum. My sister suffered 2 broken heels, and my girlfriend had internal bruising. Despite the severity of the crash, we had survived. As we stood waiting for the ambulance, my mother's eyes narrowed curiously as she pointed to my back pocket. "What's that sticking out of your pocket?" she asked, puzzled. Confused, I reached behind me, feeling something solid. Carefully, I pulled it out. My heart skipped a beat. In my hand was my sister's rosary, completely intact. The very same rosary I'd seen tied tightly to the rearview mirror, the same one I thought had shattered moments earlier. Somehow, impossibly, it had ended up safely tucked into my back pocket. To this day, none of us can explain how it happened, nor did we ever see the woman in white again. But deep down, I believe someone or something was watching over us that day. Story 5. I upgraded my gym membership for 24/7 access. Biggest mistake of my life. I signed up for a 24-hour gym membership because I was tired of people. That sounds dramatic, but I mean it in the simplest way. I hate crowds. I hate the grunts, the slamming weights, the tiny puddles of sweat people don't wipe up. I hate the awkward small talk. So I signed up for the late night membership upgrade, meaning I could swipe in after midnight. The first time I walked in at 1:13 a.m., I felt like I'd unlocked a secret level of the world. The place was empty, dark except for the emergency lights. Music off, no front desk staff, just the hum of the vending machines. Heaven, or at least that's what I thought. It didn't start creepy right away. The gym area was quiet, but normal. I even liked the eerie stillness. I wore headphones, but didn't play any music. I liked the silence better. It felt reverent. Then, after a few nights, I discovered something weird. The locker room was colder than the rest of the building. Not AC is blasting, cold but damp underground cold. The kind that settles into your bones. The kind that makes you think of basements and morgues. But the weirdest part wasn't the temperature. It was the lockers themselves. The lockers at night felt alive. The first time I noticed, I was tying my shoes on the bench. The metal lockers behind me popped loudly, like cooling metal, except they kept going. Pop, creak, rattle, shift. Normal buildings settle. Sure, but this sounded like something was moving inside. I stood and put a hand on one of them. It felt like something was breathing on the other side of the door. I yanked my hand back so hard I almost punched myself in the face. I told myself I was being dramatic. It's just old metal, air pressure, whatever. But the next night, I heard whispers. Soft, faint, impossible to make out words. But definitely whispers. I spun around so fast I slipped on the tile. No one was there. Of course. I stood still, held my breath, and I swear on my life, the lockers whispered again. This time, I could make out a word. Why? I left without working out. The next night, I considered not going back. But that stubborn, skeptical part of my brain won. There has to be an explanation, right? Midnight rolled around. I walked in. Silence. As usual. But the silence was different now. It felt aware. I didn't want to go to the locker room, but I didn't want to chicken out either. So I forced myself inside. I hesitated before opening my locker. The hum of fluorescent lights seemed louder. My own breathing echoed. Pop, creak, whisper. I froze. One of the locker doors gently swung open. It wasn't mine. I hadn't seen it move. I just noticed it was open when it hadn't been a second ago. I stared at it for a full minute. waiting for someone to jump out and yell gotcha, but nothing happened. Then, from inside that open locker, I heard soft breathing. I don't know what possessed me, but I stepped forward and looked inside. Empty, totally empty, but the breathing continued behind me. I turned slowly. Nothing. Then slam. The locker door I just opened flew shut, so hard the metal rang. I screamed, out loud, like a full-on horror movie scream. My heart felt like it was going to shatter my ribs. And then, my own reflection in the mirror across the room turned and looked at me. But I hadn't moved. I was frozen, facing the lockers. My reflection was turned toward me, smiling. It raised a hand and waved. I stumbled back, so hard I hit the locker behind me and fell to the floor. Stop. I don't even know who I was yelling at. My reflection tilted its head, smiled wider, too wide, and then it mouthed something. 3 words. You left her. I stopped breathing. How the hell did it know? No. No. Don't think about that. Stop. I whispered. Stop it. The reflection blinked. Slow. Deliberate. Then it turned its head back toward the mirror front view. Perfectly neutral. Like nothing happened. I ran out of the locker room and didn't come back for a week. But you know how horror works. Avoiding it never solves it. My brain wouldn't let it go. I replayed it over and over. The reflection, the whisper, the breathing, the words. You left her. It was a memory I kept buried. A secret I never told anyone. A night I hated myself more than I thought possible. A night I walked away when someone needed me. A night someone almost died. I tried to forget it. The locker didn't. I told myself I needed closure. So I went back, late at night again, because apparently I'm an idiot. My key card beeped at the door. The hum of the vending machine greeted me like usual, but the air was different, thicker, silent. The gym felt darker. Even the emergency lights were dimmer. I felt watched the moment I stepped in. I didn't go to the equipment. I went straight to the locker room. The moment I crossed the threshold, I knew something was waiting. The mirrors were fogged over, like the room had been full of steam, but it wasn't warm. It was freezing. The lockers were slightly open, not all the way, just a fraction of an inch, like something inside had pushed. The air buzzed with whispers, not faint this time. Clear, layered, overlapping, dozens of voices. Hundreds. Why did you knew you left? It's your fault? Tell the truth. My knees went weak. The mirrors slowly cleared. My reflection stared at me, not smiling this time. Crying. Real tears streaming down its face. Same eyes. Same everything. Except, not me. It spoke. I heard its voice out loud, not just in my head. You brought it with you. I shook my head. Brought what? It didn't answer. Instead, every reflection in every mirror turned. Angles that shouldn't have lined up. Reflections that should not have been able to see me. Dozens of me, all watching, all waiting. Then my reflection stepped forward, out of the mirror. I tried to run, but the floor beneath me vibrated. The tiles shifted. I fell hard, skin in my palms. The reflections climbed out of the mirror one by one. They weren't copies of me anymore. They were wrong. Some were older, some younger, some broken, bent, twisted, mangled. Versions of me that should never exist. Versions of me that died. Versions of me that did terrible, unspeakable things. They circled me, their eyes full of accusation. You left her, they chanted. You left her. You left her. Stop. I screamed. I didn't know she needed help. One reflection stepped forward. The first one, the one that smiled. She knelt beside me, but you knew she was hurting. My stomach dropped. It wasn't talking about some random girl. It was talking about my sister. I was 17. She was 15. She'd been so quiet lately. So distant. I thought she just wanted space. One night, I heard her crying through the wall. I stood outside her door for a full minute. I almost knocked, but I didn't want to deal with it. So I walked away. She tried to kill herself that night. My mom found her in time. I hated myself, but I buried it, pretended it never happened. We never talked about it. She got help. She's alive. She's okay now, right? Why are you showing me this? I whispered. All the reflections smiled at once, because she never left. The locker room groaned. The metal warped. The walls stretched. A locker door in the corner slowly creaked open. Inside, in the darkness, I saw something move. A girl, curled up, pale, crying. My sister, but younger, as she was that night. Please, she whispered. Please don't leave me again. My heart shattered. I won't, I said. I'm here. I reached out. Something grabbed my wrist from inside the locker. Not her. Something else. Something with long, black fingers and too many joints. It squeezed my wrist until bones ground together. You can't save her, the thing hissed. You never did. I screamed as it pulled me toward the dark. I fought, clawed, kicked. The reflections watched, emotionless. The thing dragged me halfway inside the locker. Darkness swallowed everything. The air inside was thick and wet. It smelled like rotten old tears. I thought I was going to die. Then I heard a voice behind me. A real voice. Soft, trembling. Her voice. Let him go. Everything froze. The grip on my wrist loosened. I twisted around. Standing at the locker room entrance was my sister, not young, not broken, as she is now, alive, strong, a little sad, always sad, but healing. She looked at me, really looked. I've been coming here, she whispered. Every night. I knew you were here. I knew something was wrong. The shadows recoiled from her. You didn't leave me, she said. You didn't know how to help, but you're here now. She reached out and grabbed my other hand. Warm, real. She pulled me out of the locker. The thing inside shrieked. The reflections contorted. The mirrors cracked. The whole locker room screamed. The lights flickered violently. The metal warped. The whispers turned to deafening, inhuman howls. My sister held me tight. Close your eyes, she said. I did. The world exploded. I woke up in the parking lot. It was 3:07 a.m. My sister was sitting beside me on the curb, arms around her knees. She stared at the gym entrance. It won't bother you again, she said. My voice shook. What was that? She hesitated. Pain, she said finally. The kind that festers. The kind that fills the empty places. The gym, it feeds on secrets. On guilt. People go there to fix their bodies. But the lockers, she shivered, they want what's inside your head. I stared at the building. Dark. Silent. But how did you stop it? I asked. She didn't look at me. Because I already faced mine. That hit me harder than anything else. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, I whispered, I'm sorry. She nodded. I know. Another pause. Then she took a deep breath. Can you come home with me? She asked softly. I nodded. We stood. As we walked to the car, I noticed something on the ground near my feet. A gym towel, folded neatly. I didn't bring one in. My stomach dropped. There was writing on it, in black marker. I know you heard her. I stopped walking. My sister saw it, picked it up. Read it. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked at me. Don't let in again. I nodded. We got in the car and drove away. I canceled my membership the next morning. But here's the thing. An hour after I canceled, I got an email from the gym. We're sorry to see you go. Before your account is fully closed, please remove your belongings from the locker room. There was an attachment, a photo of a locker door, slightly open. Inside, I could see a towel with fresh writing, bolder, angrier. You left all of US. I didn't sleep that night. I'm writing this now because I need someone to believe me. I don't know what the gym really is. A parasite? A mirror? A door? All I know is this. It didn't want my body. It wanted my guilt. And I'm afraid it's not done with me. Because in the silence of my apartment, Just now, from a hallway closet, I heard a soft metal click, like a locker door opening, and then whispers. Story 6. My brother went missing years ago. He came back different. Years ago, my brother disappeared. He was 34 at the time. Adults can get up and leave whenever they like for whatever reason. He left a simple note behind, saying he was looking for something and that he still loved his family, even though he needed to leave for a while. I've gotten 2 letters in the past 12 years from him saying he was still alive, although deep in the back of my mind, I assumed those letters might not be from him. A knock came at the door in the middle of the night. My son slept like the dead, so it didn't wake him up. I had no idea who it might be. The idea of a certain familiar face being on the other side never even crossed my mind. Maybe my neighbors needed something. When I opened the door, I saw a man whom I almost mistook for my late father. He had the same high cheekbones and sandy brown hair. My mouth fell open, unable to form words. Sorry it's been so long. He spoke and showed a strained smile. My hands flew to his face to see if he was really there. The brother I thought was dead had changed so much in those years. He had been gone. Before, he was a bit on the chubbier side with messy, unkempt hair. Back then, you would never assume he worked as a cop, and then later as a detective. Now he had the look of one, or at least one you would see on a classic detective show. He had lost the weight, professionally styled his hair, and wore a blue button-down shirt that matched his eyes. What the hell? I hissed. I kept my voice low and took hold of the front of his shirt, giving it a little shake. He had always been on the shorter side, so it had been easy to manhandle him. My brother raised a hand, giving my chest a playful push, trying to get the shaking to stop. I took his wrist and pushed up his shirt sleeve. He was bruised all over with new scars up and down his arm, as if he had lost a few fights with a rabid animal. What happened? These are recent. I said my mind was racing 1,000,000 miles per second. Was he kidnapped? Trafficked? Who hurt him? What had he been doing while he was gone? What the hell happened to my brother? I'm fine. He lied. He took a step and his legs faltered. I needed to support his weight and started to get him to the empty bedroom upstairs to rest. The questions could wait until he sat down. I helped him on the side of the bed, looking him over more. The first few buttons of his shirt were undone, showing he wore a few necklaces, which I thought was odd. He never would have worn jewelry before. He also pierced his ears. 2 black simple studs were on each side. I shook my head, even more confused by all of this. How'd he change so much? It wasn't just his appearance. He was far calmer than before. I love my brother, but he got annoyed really easily. I'm sorry, he said again with his hands held tightly in front of him, clearly guilty over leaving for so many years. Carson was worried about you, Charlie. I replied with crossed arms. I want to be angry, but it felt right to be able to call him by his nickname again. No matter what, I still loved him. He showed a tired smile that hurt my heart. He really did look like our father, and I was a bit jealous of how gracefully he aged. When did my short, chubby brother turn into a model? I feared his new looks were the reason why he may have been forcefully away for so many years. I wish I had a good reason. How many years was it here? I think I lost track of time. He trailed off, looking away as if trying to do a hard math problem. What do you mean by here? Time works the same everywhere. It's been 12 years. And honestly, I'm just glad you're back. I don't need a reason. I shrugged. You're a bad liar. I smacked him upside the head. I'm being a good brother. Of course, I want to know why you left. But I know you need time to recover. I threatened to hit him again, but he just softly laughed while holding up his hands. Normally, this sort of thing would get us into a fight. I couldn't get over how much he mellowed out. Let me show you what I learned while I was gone. He stood up, and I didn't really care about any neat tricks he had up his sleeve. I wanted him to rest, and then tell us what he was doing all these years. In that order. He pulled out a slip of paper from his pocket and asked me to rip it into tiny pieces. I humored him and dumped the pile on the dresser. I watched as he then took a piece of chalk and drew a perfect circle on the top of the dresser. I was impressed. He was never the artistic kind of person. A circle that perfect would be hard for most people to do. He placed the pieces of paper in the middle of the circle and then started to write odd symbols around it, causing me to frown. Did he get caught up in a cult? Did they only let him go now to recruit more members? Those thoughts disappeared when he softly spoke a single foreign word, and all the pieces of paper snapped back into place as if they hadn't been ripped apart. He looked up, beaming, proud of the display. I wasn't sure if I should call a priest or a doctor to get my head looked at. It was special paper. It had to be, I said, shaking my head. Pick out something in the room and damage it. I'll fix it. I stared at him as if he had grown a second head. Was this some sort of scam? So far, he hadn't asked for money. A framed family photo sat next to the lamp on the dresser. I had long since scanned it as a backup. But the physical photo of our parents was important to me. I decided to trust my brother regardless of how crazy it sounded. He didn't look stressed when I took the photo out of the frame and ripped it in half. I placed it in the middle of the chalk circle. He erased a few symbols and rewrote new ones. He also used a different word. Like the paper before, the photo moved on its own and snapped back into place. My legs felt weak. I slowly sat down at the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of what I just saw. So, you're like a wizard or something now? I asked slowly. Or something. He confirmed. I stood up, suddenly decided I needed one of the beers I had in the fridge downstairs. I grabbed two, but Charlie refused the one I offered him. I had even more questions, but it was late and he didn't want to go into too many details. Remember the first unsolved case I worked on? He asked once I sat down again with a cold drink in my hand. I nodded. From what I remember, the bodies of young girls have been found with photos that mysteriously showed up in different police stations. They didn't release that information to the public. Aside from myself, all our family members worked in law enforcement. So I had connections to hear details that didn't get released. I hired a person claiming he could talk to the dead. Turns out he was a necromancer. We found the bodies and, well, other stuff happened. We fell silent for a very long time. I then punched his arm hard. Other stuff? What do you mean by other stuff? Necromancers are real? What the hell did you get up to? I was fuming because I was so far behind in all the details. Sorry, it's just personal. Something happened in that case that upset him and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. He disappeared and I kept looking for him. By chance, I met the one who made him into what he was and decided to learn magic from him. He wanted to turn me into a necromancer too, but it turns out I'm really not suited to it. He said casually as if any of this made sense to me. It felt like I was missing out on a lot of details, or I might even ever fully understand, even if he tried to explain it to me. Okay, so magic was real as well as necromancers. I thought my head might explode if I heard anything else too weird that night. Where did you go? You talked about it like you were on a different planet or something. Are these necromancers aliens? At this point, aliens may not be that unreasonable. At first, he shook his head, then stopped to think. Not from space. You know about the whole multiverse theory, right? Charlie glanced at me, hopeful. I stood up, walked across the room, and closed the door behind me. I needed to pace around the house, gathering my thoughts for a full 10 minutes before I went back into the room with him. It looked like he might have fallen asleep sitting up, and I woke him by opening the door. Okay, I think I'm good. I stated, you're a bad liar. I wanted to scream, until a few hours beforehand. The only thing I worried about was if my son would ever be able to get a partner in taxes, and now, I needed to face the idea of magic and monsters being real. Placing my hands on my hips to steady myself, I went over what I had found out so far. Okay, so you met a necromancer because of a case you worked on. He disappeared. You tried to find him and got caught up in all this magic stuff. Since you weren't in the same universe as us, you lost track of time and all that. Am I missing anything? I asked, and he shook his head. Charlie, I let out a long sigh. This was hard to swallow, but better than the idea that he was kidnapped and sold into some kind of slavery. He thought the pause between us meant something else. Glancing up at him, I saw how guilty he looked and so damn tired. I'm sorry. I should have come back sooner. I can understand if you hate me for leaving you two behind. He admitted softly, hands in his lap, and unable to meet my gaze. Did you find him at least? The person who got you mixed up in all this? I asked, arms crossed, trying not to let my anger show. Yes, but he has memory issues. It'll take a while longer to get through to him. I was in the area, so I thought I would drop by, unaware so much time had passed. I sighed again, listening to him. My brother had always been like this. It was why I didn't want him to become a cop. I'd hoped his height problems kept him from that career, but he was just tall enough for the job. He was stupid, got angry easily, but refused to leave someone alone if they needed help. This felt a bit different than all the other times he put his neck out there for someone. What's the name of this necromancer you seem to have fallen head over heels for? I asked, losing the will to be upset. Neff, and I'm not. I watched as different emotions came across his face in the dark room. A realization hit him like a truck. My brother had always been stupid when it came to certain things. I would have hoped he wouldn't be dense enough to be aware of his feelings for a person he had disappeared from his family to chase after. Slowly, I watched as his face started to grow a bright shade of red as he raised his hands, trying to hide his shame. I'm so stupid, he muttered to himself. I've never seen my brother have any romantic feelings towards anyone, male or female. I'd always assumed he would die alone, dedicated to his work of helping others. I wasn't sure if I should be happy. He finally found someone, even if that took him away from his family. Even if it didn't work out between them, he was able to learn magic. So that was something. Yes, you are, but I'm glad you're back. I told him. He smiled and appeared so damn tired it hurt my chest. How about you rest up a night? We'll figure out what to tell Carson in the morning. I'm sure he'll be happy to see you, but I don't know if we should let him in on all this magic stuff. He'll go crazy over it. Too crazy. My son had taken after his now estranged uncle in a few ways. Carson was more interested in books and TV shows than going out and dating. His nerdy obsessions would be cranked up so high that he would focus so much on what his uncle had been doing instead of anything productive. Sorry to barge in like this, and thank you for letting me crash. It'll be nice to see how much Carson has grown since I last saw him. Charlie said as his head started to nod off from sheer exhaustion. Not much. We're all doomed height-wise, it seems. That's a shame. He really wanted to keep talking, but his body wouldn't let him. I helped him into the spare bed, seeing flashes of bruises on his exposed skin when his sleeves shifted. What on earth had my brother been through? We would talk about it in the morning. I waited this long. A few more hours won't kill me. He fell asleep right away. I left the room, uncertain of how I was feeling. It felt a bit odd that I accepted everything he told me so quickly. Logically, I should have doubted the crazy story a little more. If it came from anyone else, I would have. Noise came from down the hall. Carson had woken up and just finished using the washroom. He shuffled back to his room, eyes barely open. As I walked by his door, I heard his tired voice call out, "Why are you awake?" He asked. I had an early morning shift. I should have been in bed. I made a mental note to call in sick. I debated lying and letting him sleep. What if Charlie woke up and walked around the house, and Carson saw him? He looked different enough to assume a stranger had broken in. I walked inside his room and closed the door behind me. He sat up, concerned over what might be going on. I sat on the foot of his bed, unsure of where to start. "Your uncle is back," I said, keeping my voice low. Carson's bedroom was near the spare room. I didn't want us to wake up our long-awaited guest. Sensing the odd vibe in the room, Carson controlled his emotions. "Is he not good?" He asked slowly, clearly worried. Yes and no. Mentally, I think he's fine. But it looks like he's been a few things. He's sleeping right now, so we'll talk in the morning. I explained. "Are you okay?" Carson asked, C smiled at the question. Oddly enough, it felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I knew Charlie was all right. He was that kind of person to be fine no matter what. I found myself wondering where he was or what he was doing nearly every single day. I just hope Carson didn't suffer in the same way. Yeah, I'm fine, buddy. I reached out and messed up his sandy hair. When did it get so big? His mother wanted nothing to do with us. It was a struggle after my parents died to raise him, and I didn't regret a second of it. Glancing over at his bookshelf, I spotted a few more figures he had added to his collection. It was a mixture of very detailed characters, mechs, and busted girls wearing very little. Okay, so I did regret a tiny fraction of how I raised him. I stood up, ready to leave, hoping Carson would be able to sleep with this news. Just as I took a step, an odd rumbling came, then the room shook. I went over to him, sitting on his bed, holding his arm. We didn't live in an area that got earthquakes. It lasted nearly an entire minute. When things settled down, we looked at each other, clearly shaken. What was that? Something crashed. Carson offered. It did sound like something large was being moved. We lived near a highway, so maybe a transport truck caused a noise? Did it hit the house somehow? I got back up and went to the door, opening it. The air was cold. An odd, red glowing light spilled through the open doorway. I was seeing things. I closed the door again, then opened it once more, expecting things to be different. I was not looking out into the hallway. Instead, I stared off into a foreign alien landscape. The only light source was a deep red glowing ball in the sky, dyeing the twisted scene before us a blood red. It looked like the entire place was covered in thorny trees, some so old they started to crack from age. There was enough space between the trees to walk through. What the fuck? Carson asked, getting out of his bed. Normally, I didn't like him swearing, but this situation called for it. My mind was racing. Did something follow Charlie here? Was he mixed up in something he forgot to mention? I decided I should just close the door and wait for him to wake up to deal with the problem. That was not in the cards. A vine crawled across the rough stone ground, taking hold of the wood, wrapping around it to keep it open. No matter how much I pulled, I couldn't break the door free from the tight grip. A flash was reflected from the smooth surface as a large blade came down on the vines. The sword buckled and chipped, not meant to actually be used. I stood in shock over my son holding a large, now mostly useless prob weapon. Of course, he would have swords. I just hadn't seen them before. I got it a con. He admitted and tossed the weapon aside. From under his bed, he pulled out a large box, sorting through more swords he had kept hidden. Finally, he pulled out a long katana that looked more authentic than the mostly propped swords in his collection. Is this what you've been spending your overtime pay on? I asked, eyebrow raised. He didn't appear embarrassed in the slightest. He attached the katana to his waist with the belt it came with. Then he took another try and sliced the vines off the door. This time it cut without any issue. The issue was that more vines crept back as fast as he could cut them. What do you want to do? He asked, holding the sword at his side. I crossed my arms and frowned. You're dealing with all this pretty well. I pointed out, you're not freaking out, which means this is a weird-ass dream, or magic and shit are real, and you somehow know about it. And Uncle Charlie came back tonight. The timing between the time things must mean something. He shrugged. Carson wanted magic to be real for his entire life. He wasn't the type to buy crystals and believe in New Age practices. If I were going to be stuck with anyone in this kind of situation, I would be glad it was him. Yeah, something like the second theory. I don't know much. I think we should wait till Charlie dash. My words were cut off by a raspy sound coming from inside the room. I put myself between Carson and the odd noise, fear spiking through my system. A long, thin, clawed hand slid out from under the darkness of the bed. Soon, a dark figure followed, sliding out, the body moving as if it didn't have any bones. It stood up so tall that it bent its neck when it reached the ceiling. The entire shape was made up of tattered blackthorns with a bright set of white teeth hidden behind them. Amused me, it spoke in a way I thought spiders might sound if they could form words. Run. I didn't need to be told twice. Grabbing Carson's arm, I took off into the odd landscape, catching sharp branches against my skin as we bolted. He did try to slash out at the monster while on the move. His sword did nothing to the nightmare chasing so close behind. The ground under us dipped and my foot slipped. It was a miracle Carson kept the sword up and away from either of us as we slid down a small slope. Countless bones of different animals littered the bottom of where we landed. At least we lost the monster for now. Glancing up to double-check we weren't followed, I forced my racing heart to slow down. Carson was fine, just shaken, hand over the sword. I said, "Try and put on my best dad voice." He pulled it away from my outstretched hand, refusing. "I have more experience with it." He pointed out, "You can teach me." I countered. He shook his head, refusing. He was an adult now, taller than me and stronger. I knew he would be better at fighting monsters. I was still his father. Even thinking of him facing that creature was too much to bear. "I can handle this. You need to trust me." We didn't have time to stand around and talk. The sleek-backed creature appeared at the top of the hill, the shape slithering its way toward us. We wisely started to run again, sharp bones under our feet, cutting into thin socks. I wished I were facing this creature with any kind of weapon and not in my PJs. Seeing a sturdy piece of bone on the ground, I picked it up just in time. The long clawed hand came down on my shoulder, the nails ripping into my shirt. I brought the broken bone down into the cracks between the creature's thorns as it howled and backed away. Only for a moment, it darted around almost too fast to follow. A teeth-chattering cackling echoed through the air. "I'll enjoy taking you apart piece by piece," it hissed as the claws came down again. I got in front of Carson to take the slash. Thankfully, the wounds were minor. This thing was going to take its time with us. "What the hell are you? What do you want from us?" Carson demanded. He pressed his back against mine, sword in front of him. He slashed at the creature when it got too close, making it keep its distance for now. "I am something you humans can never understand. Your pesky little family member interfered with my ritual to take over your pitiful world. I was planning on killing our dear sweet monster hunter more. Then I saw he returned home. I would rather see his face of despair knowing his actions caused your slow deaths before I slaughter him." My stomach sank. We were facing a monster of nightmares we couldn't handle. If what it said was true, I doubted a sword my son bought off eBay could protect us for long. This thing was just playing with us. Carson, however, was too wrapped up in the moment to be as scared as he should have been. I looked over my shoulder to see him holding back an excited expression, hearing that his uncle went off to become a badass monster hunter. I needed to think of a way out of this. "Do anything you want of me. Leave Carson out of this. Charlie wasn't in his life. He barely knew the kid." I half-lied. He had been gone for so long. When he was here, Charlie was the best uncle anyone could ask for. Carson started to protest when a batch of vines wrapped themselves around my legs. Soon my body was covered in them, lifting me off the ground, the thorns digging painfully into my flesh. I held back any expression of pain. Carson turned, hacking away at the vines in a weak effort to help. Was this what my brother faced alone for so many years? No matter how much I struggled, I was powerless against the vines slowly tightening around each limb. The creature rose up, a tangled mess that made up its face inches away from mine. It started open, revealing what looked to be a bottomless pit of thorns and darkness. I was scared of death. Everyone is. But this fear was different. What I faced went beyond death. I don't think I would even die normally if this creature devoured me, even face to face with such horrors. I was more afraid of my son going through the same fate. I mentally begged him to run, find his room, and be safe far away from here. I couldn't move. I could speak or even close my eyes. I could only make a feeble attempt to brace myself for what came next. The moment before those thorns enclosed themselves around my skull, a booming crackling came from the sky. The monster turned its head only to be met with a fist landing so hard into it that the creature broke apart. The thorns crumbled as I was dropped to the ground, sore, bleeding but alive. The person who saved us stood above the creature, a look of pure cold hatred directed downward. I didn't recognize him with that expression. He raised a fist again, his arms a deep black so dark they may as well be a void. Heavy power crackled off the enclosed fist that came down, the ground breaking apart from the sheer force of the blow. The space around us shifted. Something in the air snapped as the image of the strange landscape literally broke into pieces, then disappeared. I found myself sitting in our backyard, Carson next to me, eyes bright from amazement. Somehow, the creature wasn't dead. It started to crawl away, shifting pieces of its body back together. Charlie, no more as this thing called him, walked over with a purpose. He placed a foot on the monster's back, pinning it to the spot. I found myself scared of him. I never thought my kind brother could look or sound like this. If you ever even think of my family again, I'll bring the full power of the first night onto your head. He said, his voice steady, hiding a held-back rage. You can't. Fee would never. The monster spoke, sounding almost pathetic, whenever Charlie threatened it with something. It was enough to make the creature let out a yelp. He lifted his foot to let it scramble away into the shadows of the night. When he turned, his face shifted back into brother I knew. I'm so sorry. I thought the barrier I set up was good enough. This is my fault. He started and hurried over to us, checking on how bad the wounds were. I started. This wasn't okay. I knew this wasn't his fault, and I shouldn't be angry at him. Will this ever happen again? I demanded. He paused and shook his head. He would use every ounce of his new power to protect us. I knew that for certain, and from the sound of things, he had a lot of it to throw around. Val, can you help my brother? He's cut up, Charlie said, and I followed his eye line. I'm man enough to admit I screamed when I saw a massive wolf standing on two legs suddenly behind me. I went in front of Carson, protecting him, my stupid son peeking over my shoulder to get a better look. The beast had dark fur, and what looked like a covering over its face was single eye painted on white fabric. After I finished screaming, the wolf disappeared as if it had never been there. He's shy, Charlie said. Okay, sure, whatever. A shy werewolf. After what I'd seen tonight, I could handle that. After we all got settled down, Charlie reintroduced us to his wolf friend. As scary as Valak looked, he was kind and soft-spoken. His tribe focused on making medical spells and treatments. He offered me a lotion that mostly healed the cuts I'd gotten that night. After that was sorted, we let Carson mostly speak to the wolf with stars in his eyes. Again, I'm sorry. I was tired and didn't protect the house properly, Charlie said as he leaned against the house. The sun was starting to rise. He looked better than when I saw him last. The short nap did him a world of good. Why didn't you kill that thing? You could have. I pointed out watching the sky change colors. I made an example out of it. I don't think a lot of monsters will mess with you after it sees how badly I took that thing apart. He answered back almost coldly. He had changed since he was gone. It was hard to accept. My little short-tempered, stupid brother turned into a person I no longer knew. I took a deep breath, collected my thoughts. I still loved him. I always would. The guy you're chasing better be like really, really hot, I said, smiling at him. He raised a hand, shaking it with a very non-committal answer. Well, at least he was within Charlie's league. Hey, kiddo, I need to go. Wrap up with Val in a few minutes. That got a whine from Carson. He had so much more he wanted to talk about, even with his face mostly covered. I could tell the wolf was exhausted from the conversation. His large body shifted into one that was more wolf-like, instead of a wolf standing on two legs. Charlie easily climbed onto his back, as if it were natural. I promise I'll stay in touch, he said, petting the dark for his ride. You gotta. I have so many questions. Come by more often, too. I'll help fight off any monsters that mess with us. Oh, and bring a Mothman next time. Carson chattered on. Charlie raised an eyebrow but nodded, agreeing to those conditions. I hated seeing him go again. This time, I had some answers. I didn't fully understand what kind of world he found himself in. All I knew was that he could handle himself. He was my dear little brother, after all. Story 7. Don't cover the paintings. I'm sitting on the cold tile of my dead aunt's bathroom floor, writing this, hoping I'm just losing my mind. I guess I should start at the beginning. It all began when I got that damn letter. I had just come home to the apartment I share with two people I barely know. Rent's too high to live alone, and splitting it 3 ways sounded better than sleeping in my car. It's small, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, but it's home. Then one day, a letter showed up in the mail from someone named Anophelia. The problem? I didn't have an Anophelia. The letter said, "Dear Zane, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Don't fret, we didn't know each other well. I only met you when you were a baby, maybe 5 times. I have no one else close to me, and I don't think anyone really deserves my house. But you might, so I leave it to you. Just remember, don't be greedy or hateful in the house. It doesn't like that. And cherish it, because if you don't, it might not like you. Hugs and kisses. Oh, almost forgot, don't ruin the paintings. And don't cover them. They don't like that. Creepy, right? But hey, free house. Who am I to say no? I arrived just after nightfall. It looked normal. Not creepy or haunted, just old. I was exhausted from the drive, so I figured I'd do a quick walkthrough before bed. The house was still fully furnished, dusty but livable. A leaky ceiling, faded wallpaper, and too many paintings. They were everywhere. One caught my eye in particular, right above the bed in the upstairs room. Weird place for a painting, but whatever. It showed a man who looked like an old-fashioned barber. White shirt, white pants, a cape tied around his neck like he was ready for surgery. In his hand, scissors. Next to him, a barber pole. Something about his eyes unsettled me, but I shrugged it off. Anophelia had warned me about the paintings, but I figured she was just eccentric. I brushed my teeth, came back to the bedroom, and swore his eyes had moved. Maybe I was just tired from the 5-hour drive. I wasn't about to get freaked out by oil paint. Still, I decided to grab a thin white sheet from the couch downstairs and toss it over the painting. And as I did, her words echoed in my head, "Don't cover them." I laughed nervously. "Sorry, Anophelia." I muttered, "You're dead. You don't get a say." Then I went to sleep. Sometime in the night, I felt something tugging gently at my hair. Half dreaming, I brushed at it, and then I heard it. Snip, snip. My eyes shot open. The barber was standing beside the bed, holding a lock of my hair in his pale fingers. His smile stretched ear to ear, eyes wide and gleaming. I screamed, bolted upright, grabbed my phone, and ran. I didn't know the house, so I burst through the first door I could find. A closet. Fine, I'd take a closet. A door was a door. I tried calling 911, but of course, no signal. And what would I even say? A man came out of a painting and started cutting my hair while I slept? Yeah, they'd locked me up. Then I heard it again, breathing, right behind me. Snip, snip, snip. I ran, straight out of the closet and into the bathroom, locked the door, turned on every light. No paintings. Thank God. I don't know what to do. I'm writing this, hoping someone. Snip, snip, snip. Story 8. There's something in the corn. That's the cliche, isn't it? The classic Midwest horror trope of murderers, monsters, and any other sort of unspeakable evil lurking in the swaying stalks of corn. Unfortunately, when you've lived there your entire life, the allure of that kind of horror is much less effective. The only things rustling around in the corn are hungry raccoons, and that's what I always believed anyway. I was always a practical one in the family. A good head on my shoulders, as my grandpa would say, and I prided myself in not being easily swept up in fantasies and conspiracy theories like my mom was, and my grandma, my Aunt Carol, and every other female member of our family. Madness always comes to women, according to Grandpa, and I was determined not to end up that way. There's always a logical explanation. That's what I believe. Well, believed. Honestly, I debated for a long time whether or not I would revisit these memories at all, let alone write them down and post them somewhere for thousands, maybe millions of strangers to see. Just another tinfoil hat loony jumping at shadows and reading between lines that haven't even been written. But I've been looking at the different posts on this site for a couple days now. This is where people go when they've seen things that can't be explained, or the explanation goes against what we as a society have deemed acceptable. I've seen things, and I'm ready to talk about them. It started when my husband Elliot and I found ourselves moving back to my family's farm to take care of my dad after he had a stroke that left him unable to take care of himself for a few months. Mom had been shipped away to a mental hospital 2 years ago. The alien conspiracy theories finally cracked her. So Dad was all by himself on 50 acres of land out in the middle of good, old-fashioned, Midwest nowhere. Now, I call this a farm, but if you're picturing giant, industrial-sized barns full of cows and massive, shiny equipment caring for endless fields of crops and hayfields, stop it. 90% of the land was woods with just enough land carved out for a 2-story farmhouse, a tiny barn for a handful of chickens, a couple goats, and an ancient swayback horse, and the cornfield that took up more land than the house and barn put together. Corn was the only thing he sold from that farm, deer bait for hunters, and when Mom was still around, he would turn the field into a maze for the neighborhood kids. At first, everything went pretty smoothly. I had a job that let me work remotely, and Elliot found part-time work at the local bookstore. Dad was recovering nicely, and I had just gotten 2 pink lines on my pregnancy test after a year of trying. I was sitting on the front porch, feeling a little sick and a little giddy, trying to think the best way to tell Elliot I didn't notice how late it had gotten. Night falls fast and hard in the country. A short twilight is the only warning you get before you're plunged into a darkness you can't imagine if you haven't experienced it. Nothing dramatic happened beforehand. The woods didn't suddenly go quiet. I didn't get an inexplicable chill down my spine. I just saw a little glint in between the stalks of corn as they swayed in the evening breeze. Small, low to the ground. A fox most likely, looking to snatch himself a chicken. A common occurrence in a place like that, so much so that I barely registered it. What I did register, though, was a rustling in the corn to the left of the glinting eyes. Probably a deer, another common sight in the cornfield. I saw a minute later. Its tawny pelt lit up in the dim glow of the porch light, but something wasn't right about the way it moved. It was hunkered low to the ground, limbs bunched up and creeping out in a way that deer limbs absolutely do not do. Picture a cat stalking a mouse, and you'll have a decent image of what this deer was doing. It's silly and cartoonish to imagine, but it was eerie to see it happening in front of me. I didn't move from my spot on the porch, transfixed by this weird deer creeping through the cornfield until it was out of halo of the porch light, and I couldn't see it anymore. I was about to get up to tell Elliot and Dad when I heard the scream. If anyone reading this hasn't heard a fox scream before, the best way I can describe it is the scream of a dying woman. People have actually reported hearing a woman screaming in the woods when what they're actually hearing is a fox. No matter how many times you hear it, it's going to scare you, and this was no exception. The scream of an animal being tortured. Blood, agony, tearing, pulling, devouring. I jumped to my feet then, and something in the cornfield rose with me, head peering above the stalks. Taller than any 4-legged animal had a right to be. The deer, the glare of the porch light made it hard to make out. But I know what I saw. I saw its giant eyes, glowing orange in the light, looking right at me, and I knew that I had been seen. Seen in the way that prey is seen when a predator is hunting, pinned in place like a moth on display. Something was hanging from its mouth, torn and tattered, dripping thick black blood into the corn. I don't remember screaming, but when Elliot burst out onto the porch asking what was wrong, my throat was raw. The deer was gone, and when I dragged Elliot out into the field to search the spot, nothing was there. No blood on the ground, no orange tufts of fox fur, not even any hoof prints. Are you sure you didn't doze off on the porch and dream the whole thing? Elliot suggested gently when I described everything over the dinner table. I wanted to say I was sure that I knew what I saw, but was I? Did I? I had been tired this last month taking care of Dad. What was more likely? That I had seen a deer stalk and kill a fox, or that I had fallen asleep and had a nightmare. Plus, deer do eat meat sometimes. There's videos everywhere of deer eating snakes or baby birds that they found on the ground. Maybe I was half asleep and saw a sick deer eating something already dead. "You sound like your mother," Dad grouched from across the table. That stopped any protest that I might have had. The stroke might have stripped him of the use of one side of his body, but his mind was still completely intact. And that was Dad speak for, "You sound crazy." Just like your mother and your grandmother and your Aunt Carol and every other woman on that side of the family. Madness always comes for women. Eventually. I mumbled that I had probably fallen asleep, and the atmosphere at the table brightened enough for the conversation to move on to lighter topics. For Dad, at least. I picked absently at my food, while Elliot squeezed my hand on the table and kept shooting me worried looks. 2 more months came and went without incident. I didn't have any more dreams or nightmares about carnivorous deer stalking the corn. None that I remembered. Anyway, Dad had improved enough that we could probably head back home next month, get back to our own lives, start planning for a baby, designing a nursery, and buying baby clothes and diapers. Things were going well, which, in my experience, usually means things are about to get bad again. I was sitting on the porch again. It was October now, and the evening air was crisp and fresh. The corn stalks had turned dry and brown and rustled noisily in the breeze. By then I had almost forgotten about the weird deer in the corn, just a weird dream born of an overworked mind. But that didn't stop my heart from jumping into my throat when I spotted the tawny coat of another one in the greasy yellow halo of the porch light. A big doe, walking with calm purpose toward the cornfield, holding something securely in her mouth. Something that dripped. Then another one, a young stag with his first set of spiked antlers, followed a few paces behind the doe. He held something in his mouth too, something that twitched, one after another. A dozen or more deer marched solemnly into dried stalks of corn, each carrying something dead or almost dead with them. I watched the whole procession from my spot on the porch, my mouth dry and my palms wet. I wasn't dreaming. I know with everything sound and sane in me that I was wide awake and stone cold sober. One last deer, a straggler, barely out its fawn spots, hurried to catch up with the rest, struggling to hold up what it carried in its mouth. Something squirming and writhing, something that dripped black-red blood onto the ground, something that cried with a voice all too human. I stood up then. My legs carried me after the deer before my brain could catch up to what I was doing. The corn stalks slapped against my arms as I charged headlong into the field. I couldn't see the deer anymore, but I could hear the crying, weak, shrill, and tearing at an instinct that had been growing in my body for the last 2.5 months. I barely managed to stop when the corn abruptly gave way to a clearing, perfectly round, the stalks stomped down by countless hooves for who knows how long. The deer were all assembled, standing silently inside the circle, their prey laying their hooves like offerings to the beast that stood in the center. I went to a museum once as a kid and saw the remains of a prehistoric deer. I can't remember what it's called, and I remember being amazed at how big it was. How strong its neck must be to hold up such massive antlers, each one longer than a man. This was bigger. It was white, taller than any moose or elk, neck as thick as a tree trunk, golden antlers so tall and so wide they surrounded the moon that rose above its head, creating the illusion, I think, that it was wearing it, the only jewel worthy of such a mighty crown, of such a mighty creature. I watched as it surveyed the offering set before it with frosty disinterest until it reached the baby, still wailing, still squirming around in its own blood on the hard, pointed floor of broken-off corn stalks. The beast's ears flicked forward for a brief moment of interest, and it lowered its massive head to sniff at the pathetic thing. It must not have liked what it smelled, because it raised its giant hoof above the flailing lump and brought it down. Hard. I thought it would crunch, like stepping on an egg, but it didn't. Just a dull thud, and the crying stopped. I made a noise and a gasp or a cry. I can't remember which. And 24 heads turned in my direction. 24 pairs of empty, black eyes, glowing in the moonlight and freezing me in place. The deer didn't move, Not so much as a flick of an ear, they just stared. The white monster huffed loudly through its nose and pulled its lips back in a snarl that defied the deer body it wore. Its teeth were the teeth of a wolf, dripping with thick ropes of saliva. It stepped forward. The congregated deer silently parted to make room, and approached where I stood at the edge of the clearing. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, I could barely think. I could feel the ground shaking with every step the beast took, closer and closer, until it blocked out the world with a wall of white. It hurt to look directly at its face, but something told me I didn't dare look away. It wanted me to see, wanted me to feel the full force of its presence. It leaned its head down and sniffed me like it had with a baby. And something changed. Its ears perked forward. Its mouth relaxed. The deer in the clearing huffed and shifted in anticipation. The white beast opened its mouth, and I was treated to a view of its black tongue and cavernous gullet. I was going to eat me, swallow me whole. I was the sacrifice it had been wanting, the offering on the altar. Instead it spoke, slow, hoarse, forcing words out of throat not made to make them. Daughter, update, E-stars. I didn't have time to think about what those words meant. The beast touched its muzzle to my stomach, and suddenly I wasn't myself anymore. I was something old, something afraid, something running away. I was hurtling through the stars faster than a human mind could fathom. I was burning up in the atmosphere. I was crashing through trees and rolling in the grass. I was getting crushed under the weight of gravity I had never felt before. I was seeing a creature with branches on its head that reached the sky. I was making myself into it. I was learning its body, blood, bones, muscles, cells. I was seeing a different creature, small and soft and staring in terror and wonder as I made myself. I was making a connection. I was making a connection. I was making a consonant. I I woke up in a mental hospital. The nurse screamed when I asked her where I was. My stomach had distended into a proper pregnant belly. I had been there for 3 months, silent, unresponsive, catatonic. My husband had found me sitting in the middle of the cornfield, dried, bloody tears on my face, staring at the moon, just like how Dad had found Mom 2 years ago, and how Grandpa had found Grandma. The doctors asked me all sorts of questions about what had happened to cause what they called a psychotic break. Nurses tactlessly asked if my husband was beating me, if the stress of taking care of my father could have caused a nervous breakdown. I didn't tell them the truth, of course. Stories about monstrous, alien deer would inspire much confidence about my mental state. I told them what they wanted to hear, took all the right steps toward a normal recovery, and was released from the hospital a mentally sound woman. All I wanted to do was forget, but I can't. I cried when my baby was born, not for any of the normal reasons, though I pretended that's what it was for Elliot's sake. I cried because it was a baby girl, and I've kept crying for her for the last 3 years, because I can see it. I can see it just like I'm sure Mom could see it in me, in her big blue eyes that stare at the moon with seriousness that no toddler should have. Madness always comes to the women in my family. Story 9, I am a banisher. When I woke up, I wasn't alone. It's a new day. It's not better than yesterday. I woke up to movement under my shirt, not on top of, under. Something slow and cold, dragging itself across my stomach. Then another further up, then a dozen more. For a little while, I was too dazed to move. Definitely too tired to be scared. Just a little confused and uncomfortable, trying to wrap my head around what the heck was going on. Then I felt the little tea-things of each and every one, all at once. Tiny little ribs, chewing or kissing, or whatever that was in rhythmic motions all over my torso. I sat up so fast the room spun and black dots danced in my line of vision. As I stood up, they poured out, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Snails, sliding, chewing, mumbling motions with their mouth bodies. A living, glistening tide, covered in slime, both wet and dry. It's impossible to describe exactly what it feels like to be covered in snails like that. Wrong is probably the closest disgusting a contender. I swear I could hear the soft clicks of their shells knocking together as I stood up, the tiny wet pops as their suction let go. Skin against my skin. The trails cool and sticky and tacky, and you can feel it drying. You can smell them and their disgusting slime. Cold and earthy, damp needles on leaf-covered ground and dirt after rain. Slightly sweet underneath. I ran. The shirt hit the floor with a wet thump, bringing most of the snails with it. Then my pants were off, then the rest strewn about as I made my way into the bathroom. I frantically scratched and dusted them off with my hands. Each soft pop, a new kind of torture mixed with the sound of them hitting the ground behind me. I made it into the shower, and as I stood there shivering in the morning cold and reached for the shower knob, the pipes. What if that's where they came from? What if I turned the water on and it was just snails? So I stood there for a longer than acceptable amount of time with my hand outstretched, tiredness like sand in my eyes, contemplating, waiting for something. I don't know what. Finally, I twisted the handle, still expecting a torrent of slime and shells and crunch and clicks to come raining down on me. But there was just water, cold as shit, but just normal water. Clean. I stayed for a long time, with my hand on the temperature knob, turning up every few seconds until water was burning my scalp and back, leaving my skin raw and red. As I made my way back through my apartment, the snails were exactly where you'd expect them to be, I think. Not static in place, but not very far away from where they had been violently thrown off, either. It was most obvious around my bed and the soggy shirt on the floor. A couple of dozen snails of varying sizes were scattered around, most of them centralized close to the shirt, a few further off. A yellow and black striped one had made it the furthest, its little eye things curiously pointing out as it was munching its way up my nightstand. As I flicked it off, reaching for my phone, the idea hit me that I had definitely seen that fucking snail before. I let my eyes wander back down, traced the pattern on the shell, a soft spiral of colors. I stared at it for a long time, trying to take in any detail, any discrepancy, anything unique. I don't think snails come in a lot of variations, to be fair. Not these normal ones. I can't really quantify this, but that fucker, I had definitely seen him before. The exact same one, and I am unhealthily certain this is true. I did what anyone in my position would do. I grabbed a black marker from my nightstand, forcibly plopped him into a small glass dish I keep spare batteries in, and drew a large dot on his side. An identifiable splotch, definitely not meant to be there. If I am wrong, well, nothing lost. If I am right, I don't know. I really don't. I collected a handful more of varying colors, dotted their sides numerically. 2, 3, 4, 5 dots. Then I threw them out the window. Didn't even feel bad about it. Good riddance. I washed my hands thoroughly, then went back for my phone. I had a new text message from Henning, but honestly, it wasn't very helpful. Part of it is probably due to what I sent him last night, which in hindsight reads as crazy ramblings about snails. Don't know how much he could do with that. Handlers are what they are. Part therapists, part dispatchers, part insurance adjuster. They just kind of show up when you've seen enough. There's just a text message or a call one day, matter-of-factly. They are useful most of the time, though connecting us lower peasants with the other departments, even if hardly ever directly, they disappear in the same manner they appear. By the way, one day the text just stopped, their number's not reachable. The number you have tried to reach cannot take your call right now. I don't think it's anything nefarious. By the way, I think it's just retirement. Okay, I guess that sounds very nefarious. I mean in the sense that there's only so much a person can take. There will be things that get to you, and I assume the handlers work the same. Since it's all assignment-based, to the best of my knowledge at least, it makes sense. One day you just stop. Not Henning, though. He's been with me for over 6 years, and even though he's the way he is, he's really good. Well, normally, the text message wasn't that useful, like I said. Never heard of ghost snails. Can reach out to the archive and ask. Doesn't sound related to the assignment, though. So you probably fucked up. Thanks, I guess. I wasn't expecting any follow-up questions or reassurance. Not really his thing. But I felt a bit offended he insinuated quite bluntly that I'd somehow let a haunting hitch a ride home in my backpack, and the undertone that I tend to fuck up, not true by the way. Still, one line stuck with me. Doesn't sound related. I told you I haven't really ever heard of ghost snails. I think I prefer transdimensional snails by the way, but maybe the snail problem can be broken down into simpler parts. Maybe it's not about snails at all. So, while I had breakfast, I brought out my collection of notebooks, trying to find any cases that shared something with this situation. Try to define the problem. There are snails. They act like, well, snails, except for the fact that they're appearing randomly in my apartment. I've crushed a few, and that didn't seem to change anything in either direction. They don't seem to care about the iron or salt in the doorways, but I figure I can't be certain yet. It's possible the snails are the same snails, and that probably changes things. Or maybe I'm just going crazy. It sure feels like it. The more I try to break it down, the more almost all of my previous cases feel like they shared some similarity. So I try to focus on one thing at a time. Snails, like most things, need to follow the laws of physics. In the case they are normal snails. They shouldn't just appear out of nothing. Yet that's what they're doing. I had a case that was semi-similar in that sense. Things appearing out of seemingly nowhere. I am a bit embarrassed to share, but I have it noted down as the things that stay behind in my notebook. I could be poetic when I want to be, I guess. I'll try to stay concise as I tell you about it. Maybe you can help me connect this crap into something more useful. I have nothing. Here goes. It was maybe 8 years ago, before my knees started sounding like unoiled hinges. A university town in the middle of the country, known for its state-of-the-art archaeology program and its ludicrously expensive coffee. My then handler Jessica connected me with the curator of a small regional items type museum running shop outside the city center. Items shown were mostly stuff taken from the excavation site a few miles outside of the city, an old and semi-preserved Bronze Age settlement found several years prior when some company had blown open the side of a mountain to lay roads. Jewelry, blobby figurines, broken sword pieces, that kind of stuff. Just remnants. Mostly nothing known about them except the age and type of item. This case was marked as suspicious from the get-go. The museum wasn't doing too well and had done its own little job spreading rumors about haunted or holy items to try and gain traffic. I think whoever summarized the assignment to begin with thought it was a big bowl of nothing, and that reflected on the commission. My dad had just passed away, though, and I was trying to keep busy at this time, so it was perfect for me. The curator, I think his name was Sven, said things had begun appearing inside the display cases. Things that were not part of the collection. It had started small, a cheap ring, discolored green, or a broken watch. A single leather glove, torn around the edges. Initially, Sven thought they were the victims of a prank of some kind, either a visitor or maybe one of the interns trying to spook the others. But it kept happening, and the items weren't as random as they first seemed. One day, a teacher touring the museum with her students saw her cashmere scarf used as a blanket for a curvy bronze figurine and lost her shit audibly enough to startle the curator. As she was telling her young students off, Sven became suspicious. The museum had just opened for the day, and he knew that scarf hadn't been there when he had done the rounds that morning. The case was also locked, and at that time he was the only one with a key safely around his own neck. A few days after, a woman made a police report as she saw her diamond wedding ring laying next to some chiseled and cracked bowl remnants, and I guess that's when Sven reached out. Like I said, they weren't doing well, and getting written up for theft was exactly well needed when I arrived. The museum had been closed to the public for a week or so. Every case was sealed in plastic, but new objects kept appearing. Sven just left them there. No one saw them appear, and the curator swore he had slept in the building since they closed it and hadn't heard a thing. They just show up, he said. I remember he sounded defeated, like they've always been here. I took his key, which he swore was the only one, and sent him home. It was a small place, 2 floors, no basement. Every surface was clean, and the air smelled of old wood polish and pine. I did a full circuit, tried to feel for tethers. The sealed cases were normal enough, glass and plastic, and laminated notes on the items inside. Each held a mix of the real artifacts. Ancient pots, decorations, bronze and bone and wood, and the newer intrusions, an expired metro ticket, a disposable lighter with a plastic case half missing, a cracked iPhone black, old enough to almost be considered an antique itself, all tagged and displayed as carefully as if they had been dug up alongside the old stuff. I checked for drafts, traps, tricks. Nothing. I stayed the night. The air inside got stale and warm. At this point, I could feel the tether, if ever so loosely. It was hard and rough, strung tightly. As the night passed, its pressure made the stillness feel like a facade, as if it was all staged for someone. I don't know if it was for me. Around 2 in the morning, as I was doing my 4th round, I found the anchor. I could feel the tether clearly, could almost taste the tension. A small gleam in the corner of my eye from one of the cases, and I knew it. I had found the anchor. The reflection in the glass looked wrong. Where it had been as meticulously polished as everything else in there, the glass looked almost double now. Between the 2 panes, smudges, soft and fatty against the slick surface, as of small fingers in the space between. It shimmered like oil when I moved around, giving the illusion that the smudges were prints, pressure points from somewhere else, as if there was a hand, right there, fingers pressed up curiously at the glass. Only, it wasn't looking at the artifacts from outside. It was looking at me. The idea startled me enough to jump back a little, and when my eyes got back to the case, the smudges were gone. Inside the case, nestled neatly between 2 knife fragments, a wallet. I recognized it instantly. The black, worn leather, a faint burn mark in the left corner where I had dropped a cigarette years earlier, sometime before, when I still went to pub. I hadn't carried that wallet in over a decade. Lost it sometime in my late teens, probably on a bus. Never found it again. Now there it was behind the glass with a neat tag displayed flatly. Neat handwriting. Artifact 347B. Contemporary personal item. Donor unknown. I unlocked the case. The key felt warm. With one hand clutching my protective charm in my pocket, I slowly opened the case with the other and reached for the wallet. The inside of the case was chilly. The moment my fingers brushed the worn leather, I felt it pulse. A slow, deliberate thump against the tip of my fingers, like something small and fragile and patient was beating inside. Waiting. I yanked my hand back. The air around me felt like it was shimmering with excitement. All the display cases vibrated softly in waves, a deep and throatless sound that rattled through the floor and into my bones. Every tag fluttered. For a second, all the bronze and bone and plastic and gold in the room shifted in place, like they knew they were not in the right place. Then, just as suddenly, silence. It felt as if I was breathing syrup, and I could hear my blood rushing in my ears. I looked down. The wallet was in my hand. Now, my fingers tightly grasped around it. The case wasn't the anchor anymore. The wallet was. The laminated tag was gone, replaced with a torn piece of paper, tied around the spine with a yellow piece of string. It was blank. It wasn't pulsing anymore, but it radiated an uncomfortable heat that almost made my skin feel cold. I grabbed a small plank of willow from my bag and ruthlessly spiked the wallet to the board with a thick iron nail. The head bit the board with a satisfying little moan of metal on wood. The wallet gave a little shiver, and I felt the eyes that had been burning into me from the case fade away. It settled fast, and the room felt less stuffy in an instant. Afterwards, I sat with my back against the case for a bit, trying to settle myself, I guess. I don't know what the presence was, but it hadn't felt like the angry kind, nor vengeful in any way. If anything, the only emotion I had gotten out of the tether was annoyance, at me and my actions, like a stern parent scolding you for something when you should have known better. I put the wallet and the plank into an envelope together with some cleanse, sprinkled a little salt on the glue before closing it. Straight to the archive with that shit. Just needed a drop-off point. My phone was in my pocket. I called Jessica. Straight to voicemail. I left a clipped message. Hey, it's me. I am on this assignment. I think I solved it, but I don't know what it was. That type of stuff. I told her about the donor unknown and that the anchor was secured. To please call me back so I can get rid of it. I tried again at 4, at 5, and finally at 6. When I felt confident enough that I didn't feel any remnants of the tether, I left. Since it was still early, I drove by Sven's house and just put the key in his postbox, left a post-it next to the door. Good enough, with the envelope on the passenger seat. I stopped for coffee I didn't really want 3 times. By the last traffic light out of town, the smell of hot milk made me so nauseous I almost threw up. Back at the hotel, I jotted some quick notes down. The date, what I touched, what happened. I underlined donor unknown several times, drew a bad sketch of hand with long fingers in the margin. Then I closed the book and moved on, because that's what we do. Jessica never did call me back. I got a new handler, of course, in due time. Got that stupid envelope dropped off. I don't know what happened with it after that. Bit above my pay grade. The case did stick with me, though. I guess most of them do. In some ways, small bruises on my soul. What gets to me is that I am pretty sure the ankle was moved. For me, I don't know why. But yeah, I think Henry may be right. The snails are not related to the Lady of Death, or whatever. No more than I am related to museum and the random shit that appeared there. This isn't about snails. It's about the anchor. I turned around in the dark because this took a lot of time to write, and I had that feeling I was forgetting something stupid and domestic, like a light on somewhere or a teacup. The painted snail was back, halfway up the nightstand, right where I had scooped him up this morning, unbothered. Same shell color, same little blotch on the side, now a little smudge into the yellow and black pattern. I don't know whether I should be angry, relieved, or terrified at this point. Honestly, I just feel defeated. I am only certain of one thing as of right now, that the fucker came back, and that he somehow knew to put himself where I would definitely see him. Story 10. My university's oldest society tasked me with selecting the cadaver for this year's ritual. Do you think morality is binary? Or do you think that maybe sometimes good people do bad things in the name of something better? Throwaway account for reasons that will become clear. There is nowhere else where it will be appropriate for me to seek out and connect with those who may have any advice for me, and if I don't document this somewhere, I will not have tried hard enough to warn those who come after me of the fate that could befall them. It'll begin by explaining the series of events that led to my little problem. I am in my final year of earning a doctor of medicine at one of the USA's leading universities. I'm sure you know the one. You've seen the name plastered across hoodies and sweatshirts worldwide. As well as being lucky enough to attend this incredible university, I have somehow been lucky enough to be accepted into some of the most highly regarded societies and clubs, which have helped me open every door I've desired access to. The majority of the clubs I am a part of have regular meetings and public events which require attendance and participation in order to retain your spot. The one I am referring to, the one that birthed my problem, is entirely different. This isn't a club that you will find advertised anywhere, not by the university itself, not even by its members. This is a word-of-mouth, highly exclusive club that meets only once annually and keeps itself very much to itself. Its new members are sought out by a recruiter. The story begins last night. Let's call the society in question the secret society, so that I'm not giving away anything identifying. I need you to understand that this society has been running longer than you or I have been alive. It was founded in the 1600s during the university's infancy, and it will remain for as long as the university stands tall. Upon my entry into society in my first year, amongst a plethora of other juvenile and symbolic tasks and missions, I was given my role, selector. It was explained to me by the board of alumni present for my inauguration meeting that the role was only for a one-time instance where I would be faced with making the choice of which of the cadavers we were to extract from the morgue for participation in the ritual. I know how it sounds, but you don't understand. I had managed to convince myself that I had been given the best role, the least unethical role. In order to understand any of the decisions that I have made, you must understand that our intentions are nothing but good. If someone had the capacity to bring back a deceased loved one of mine, I would certainly deem that to be good. Given the promise and excellence that oozes out of the university, The secret society's pledge to finally allow man to conquer death is one that I can truly get behind, with the true belief that if any human can bring life back after the moment of death, it is the humans within the society. When I had my initial discussion after the recruiter gauged my interest and set up the meeting, my mentor, we'll call him Pete, explained to me that in my final year, I would be required to attend and participate in a historic ritual. Pete was a brilliant mentor. He helped facilitate my attendance to the 3 society meetings that occurred annually through my first to third years in university. These 3 meetings were undoubtedly the 3 most enlightening evenings of my life. If my life weren't in jeopardy, I would find so much joy in sharing some of the unfathomable discoveries and studies enacted by the secret society. Medicine would never be the same. The first 2 meetings were split between focus on some of society's fundamental beliefs and the undeniable evidence that founded these beliefs, and an introduction to some of the more unorthodox methods that past members have found success with in partial or full reanimation of a cadaver. The third meeting was 12 hours entirely dedicated to the thorough explanation of every role and its purpose, the order in which everyone was to perform their roles, and a full demonstration of our version of the ritual was to entail. This meeting culminated with myself and the 5 other students that formed my team standing before the 3 elder alumni who had previously hosted the evenings as they reconfirmed all of our roles: the selector, the conductor, the vessel, the scribe, and the usher. After our roles had been confirmed, one by one we recited the oath that we had learned at our first meeting. By life, a secret kept. By hand, we conquer death. By oath, a shepherd I shall be at any time the society calls for me. At this time, the 3 alumni retrieved 5 huge, beautiful leather-bound books. 2 of them took the weight of the books, as the third distributed them to their respective new owner, or rather, their current owner. It had previously been explained to us during one of our meetings that we would all come to borrow a manual that had been compiled by every other person who had stood before you in your specific role. This book was not ours to keep. We were merely lucky enough to have access to all of this otherwise unattainable information that pertained to our role. This meant that we all had just short a year to absorb every word written in our manuals. I had just under 12 months to learn everything that any of the selectors before me felt important enough to document, and I really did dedicate every moment of free time to this cause to ensure my duty was performed as well as it possibly could be. I did everything right. My responsibility as a selector can be summarized as this: I was tasked with considering all the factors, every warning, each anecdote recorded through the centuries, and making a decision as to which cadaver from the morgue, if any, would make the best candidate for our procedure. There were multiple entries from selectors throughout various periods in history where the only scientifically and medically viable option was to postpone the ritual until a viable participant could be secured. The first entry in the manual was dated 1803, when Giovanni Aldini performed his first public demonstration on a corpse, sparking life back into the subject, if only for a moment. Each of the manuals begin with this entry, we were told, as Aldini originally performed all 5 roles by himself. Obviously, every part of the Lumen Protocol has evolved since its inception. Arguably, it has so far evolved far past where it ever should have. I don't make this point to criticize the protocol. I make this point to highlight the work that the Society has done and the light years closer we have gotten to allowing man to overcome death. This meant that I had access to over 200 years of data and experience to consider upon making my selection. What I had not considered, what I had not been warned against, what had not even been noted on a single line on a single page was a possibility for someone else in the university to have also been conducting their own unrecorded, experimental medical intervention, one that would render my choice of cadaver catastrophic. As to not confuse the issue, before we arrive at the destination, please allow me to illustrate the journey. The historically based ritualistic procedure that we had choreographed for this year's experimentation was a slightly altered version of an archaic practice that we will refer to as the Lumen Protocol, for the sake of secrecy. Our version of the Lumen Protocol looked like this. I know how it sounds. Please don't forget the Society's true motivations. I, as the selector, would begin the procedure by choosing a cadaver from the university's morgue. There was no abundance of choice. There were 9 cadavers in the morgue on the night in question, 2 of which were minors, immediately disqualified. 4 of them had lifelong health conditions that were listed countless times throughout the manual as contraindications, and there was 1 double amputee, all disqualified. That left 2 choices, both seemingly equally as viable as the other based upon every single variable that I had the knowledge and capacity to deduce. As I continued to assess the risk of using one of the seemingly viable cadavers over the other, I noticed that one of the patients had moderate bruising of the abdomen and chest, the specific areas in which we would be placing electrodes. These bruises were likely sustained during attempted CPR, which could indicate weakening of the chest wall. The other cadaver had a slight perceptible advantage in that this bruising was not present. This acted as a deciding factor for me at this moment, as there were no other detectable medical advantages of picking one over the other. Once I had made my final decision, one I was entirely confident in, I thanked the cadaver for his worldly choice to donate his body to research. I cleaned and bathed him in the exact way that was depicted throughout the manual. I did every step, no matter how insignificant certain phrases felt to speak during certain actions, no matter how silly I felt kneeling before the table on which he laid to pay respects to him, and every cadaver that had come before him in this protocol. I did everything right. After I had finished preparing and paying respects to cadaver, I transported him to the disused anatomy lab that we were to be using for his procedure. The word ritual is one that I find to be personally tough to resonate with, as the word evokes a certain performative feel that can border on silly. Silly generally has no place in medicine, which I think is why I found this next portion to be the most difficult. To me, the ritualistic chanting that came next was much more unpleasant and unnatural than making the clinical, evidence-based choice of which cadaver would be of most appropriate use. The role of the selector can be very briefly broken down into 3 distinct stages. Stage 1 was the only stage to be completed alone and consisted of cadaver selection and respect offerings, the events I have just described. Stage 2 would involve just myself and the appointed scribe recording the cadaver's measurements, reviewing any documented medical history, and then the ceremonial removal of the ID bracelet that bound the body to its worldly death. Thirdly, after the ritual had commenced, it was clear throughout the manual that it was my duty to assist reset the body to its prior state with another thorough cleaning. This third duty is the one I never had the chance to even attempt. Based on the manual, I believe that I am the only selector in history to have not fulfilled this duty. At this point, I haven't slept since this happened, and I can still smell the lingering musk that lives only upon the dead. I've showered twice, but it's becoming too much to bear again. I've been trying to document this for 3 hours now, and I'm only just now getting to the place where the problem lies. The ritual. I'll finish explaining everything when I've slept. I can't bring myself to relive it quite just yet, if I can sleep at all.